Welcome to the Describe Your World podcast, episode 9. I'm pretty excited about today. I'm here with my guest, Ethan, and we've known each other for a long time. We've talked a little bit over the course of the past 10 years, but haven't really stayed, quote unquote, in touch. But there are a lot of cool things to talk about today. So how are you feeling, man?
I'm feeling good. I just started a new job and ready to, get that going. I've spent my first week as a middle school teacher this week. It was an experience for sure.
Yeah, so we can just dive right in with your middle school teaching job if you want. How's that what's that like for you? Is there anything you weren't expecting?
It's kind of pretty much how I expected it. I'm still learning like the procedures and when to do certain things. I was a little worried about being around children all day because I haven't been around children in a while, and I was like, it's going to be odd at first, but I fell right in. They would come up to me and tell me stories and all the things they liked and what they've been up to. And I'm just like, okay, cool. And I was surprised they actually listened to me, but I guess that's the perk of being an adult.
Yeah, you definitely have a position of authority when it comes to working with kids, but at the same time, you don't know if you're going to get that experience where they respect and acknowledge that, or if they're going to see you as a big kid and just try to, make fun out of it.
So far, it seems like they're pretty respectful. There's definitely some students that want to act out, but you always have a couple. But for the most part, they're pretty respectful. I haven't seen any major issues, so I think it'll be all right.
Fingers crossed. And we'll definitely get into some of the intricacies of sort of how you got there and how that came to be, and how that was sort of part of your goal originally. But I do want to get started at the beginning. So I'm going to let you sort of take the reins when it comes to early life stuff, and just sort of talk about some of the more impactful experiences you had when you were young. And if there's any significant people, any significant experiences, feel free to elaborate on anything you'd like. And then I'll just kind of ask questions as we go and bump off of some of that too.
All right. I was born in 94. Nothing spectacular about that. The last year you can really be classified as a 90s kid, I think, So growing up in the 90s was fun. I enjoyed the television, the pop culture, everything that I could absorb as a kid. And I still look fondly back on that time. But once 2000 hit, my mom died when I was 6. So it was a pretty big shock to the system. I didn't really know how to handle emotions at that age. So I was kind of left to my own devices. My grandparents took me in, my brother, and my sister, and they did what they could, but they didn't really understand how to raise children. It had been so long since they had children, and the world had changed. So they didn't know how to help me process through what I was going through. So I spent the first 4 years of my life completely isolated because my grandpa would absorb himself in his work after he got home from work. My grandma would just clean the house and do anything she could to not have to stop so she wouldn't cry. My brother was off doing his thing, and my sister was a teenager, hanging out with friends, never at the house. So it was just me in a room by myself all day, every day, with my own thoughts. And it was an odd childhood. I'll say that. Yeah.
What is the age gap for you and your sister?
My sister is 8 years older than me, and my brother is 12 years older than me. So I was, drastically different ages.
You felt like an only child.
Kinda, yeah. A little bit. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. I always saw my brother as more of a father figure than anything. So, and my sister was just mean at the time. But as I grew older, we got closer. But, if it wasn't her running me over with a go-kart or throwing high heels at me, it was something else.
So obviously losing a biological mother at that age that's a really big change sort of for someone to process, particularly someone who's developing and growing. So how did you feel that space, or did you even recognize, how impactful that was at the time?
I didn't recognize it at all. For years, I had dreams that I was just going to walk into the kitchen and she would be sitting at the table. So it didn't process that, the loss was final. It just seemed like, oh, well, this sucks. I'll get there eventually. Like, she'll come back, but she never did. So, that when that finally sinks in, your world just loses a lot of that color that it had before, and you don't really know how to process everything going on around you.
And you mentioned that, your grandparents weren't, hadn't had practice basically being parents for a long time. So it was a challenge for them to really be parental figures for you. But was there any normalcy to like early life and growing up? Do you remember anything that had structure and organization that was helpful for you?
Not really, like bedtimes and things like that, normal things. But as far as like emotional normalcy or regulation or anything to that extent, no. Anytime anybody would get upset, they would just fly off the handle and, either start yelling or throwing stuff or, running off and crying and trying to pull guilt trips on people. So it wasn't intentional on their parts, but like they were so blinded by what was going on that they were just more or less babysitters than anything else, if that makes sense.
I know that it's something that I've experienced too, is even especially looking back, is that when you're little, you're always looking for some type of figure or person to imitate. You want to learn from someone and figure out how to do things correctly. So really those adult figures are the ones who provide that model. So I'm curious, did you have someone that you sort of based things off of and kind of followed along?
Oh, my brother, 1,000%. He was my role model when I was younger. Like we had our problems and things happened, but he was the closest thing I had. After my parents got divorced a year before my mom died, my dad kind of just went and did his own thing. He was doing drugs and partying all the time and didn't want to be a father. I remember there was this one time that he had told me he was coming to pick me up from school, and we got out at 12 that day. And my grandmother was a teacher at the school, and so she didn't leave till 3 or so. And by 3, I was still sitting in the hallway, and my sister saw me, and she went and called my dad, and he was at the beach with his friends doing cocaine. So,
wow.
Like, I didn't have a father figure, so the closest thing I had was my brother. And over the years, my relationship with my father got better, but it was always, incomplete.
So you were looking for answers where in a place where there were no answers. You were just kind of piece it together on your own.
Yeah, and that's probably why I have to have an answer for everything and a meaning for everything today. Like I'm always searching for that.
Obviously, we didn't spend a lot of time together. Fun fact, I don't know if you ever knew this, but you were the first person that I met from our group of students, from the school. I knew one student for like 20 years, but then everybody who was new, you were the first person because we met at a birthday party. And being the introvert that I am, I, of course, didn't approach anyone. So you being the person that you are came and found me and was like first talking about music like right away.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out that way. But
I was introverted too.
What's that?
I said I was introverted too. I was scared at that party. I remember that party. I was like, I don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
That guy doesn't look like he knows anybody. I'm gonna go over there.
Yeah, I don't know. Music was a weird, interesting, and beneficial thing for our group because we had for context, we were in a group of people. The entire high school where we were in school was like 15 kids. So everything from 9th grade through 12th grade was 15 to 20 kids. And that was it. That was all we had for the high school.
One teacher.
But music was the one thing that we talked about nonstop and bonded and connected over.
Yeah. A little bit of that music is cringy today to think back about, but it was definitely a major part of my school time and my home time. Like, it's not like the being alone all the time stuff ended when I was like 10. It's just when I kind of like accepted it really. So I would get home from school and I would start playing guitar, and I wouldn't stop until I went to sleep every day. And I did that for 5-6 years. I started playing when I was 13, I think. And, up until the day I graduated, that's what I did when I got home. I played guitar and got yelled at because it was too loud. But
Where did you get your first guitar? You said 13.
I had begged for one for about a year, and they kept telling me that I was going to pick it up, play it for a couple of days, put it down, never touch it again. I was like, I'm not going to do that. That's not me. Knowing I had done that with every sport I had played, every hobby I'd picked up. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And we were, I think it was at Dollywood. There was a music store there, and we went in and we looked at guitars, and I picked up one and I started trying to figure out how to play. And they were like, we're not getting you one. And we left. And I was like, well, that's terrible. And about 2 weeks later, my brother came home from Colombia. He was visiting my sister, and he was just like, I bought you something. And he handed me this guitar. It was a Fender. Wait, no, I'm wrong. Don't believe me. I am wrong. We went to meet him down there. He was in the military, not military. He was a corrections officer, and he was in the academy for being a corrections officer. We met him down there that weekend, and he wanted to go to the music store, and we went, and he found this Fender acoustic that was in a hard shell case for like $200, and he bought it for me, and that was my first guitar because he got tired of me sneaking around trying to play his. He didn't want me to break it, so he bought me one.
So what was the draw, the initial just seeing it, or did you already love music before you wanted a guitar?
I had always had a fascination with music. Me and my brother really bonded over music. Anytime we got in the car, he was dancing and singing and being silly and playing music anywhere from 50s pop up until 90s rap, 2000s rap. So music was ever present in my life, and I wanted to, when I started watching like MTV and VH1 and stuff like that, I wanted to be able to do what those guys were doing, right? I would see them playing these solos or all this stuff, and I want to do that. So, I'm sorry, it's storming here.
No, that's okay. I don't know that it's picking up anything too significant, okay. But do you remember do you have a memory of the first time you saw a performance and something kind of clicked? Because the reason I asked that is because I have a very specific, very clear, vivid memory of, I think it might have been 2004, 2005. I was watching TV. Don't remember what show it was on, but I remember Bon Jovi performing live on the show, some kind of talk show. And I can't remember the guitar player's name. I can't remember the guitar player's name, but he had like an SG, like a double head SG, and they were playing, and I was like, I fell in love with it. And it's very vivid in my mind what that was like. And that's what made me want to learn music and play music. So
it was watching Eric Clapton play live on a DVD my brother had. And it was Eric Clapton's Crossroads Guitar Festival 2003 or 2004. And I think it was when they were doing Cocaine to start like the DVD off. And like as soon as I saw that and I saw the solo and the all the different people on stage, I'm like, I want to do that. Like I want to be up there in front of people doing that, playing music, expressing myself to all these people that I don't have to have a one-on-one connection with, right? Just experiencing humanity in a musical setting. And I just wanted to learn how to play. So I started sneaking around playing my brother's guitar. And from there, I was hooked.
Yeah, it's kind of what we said earlier. You were searching for answers, and then all of a sudden there was an answer there that kind of made sense. And you can resonate with people, communicate with people, touch people in a way. And all that's required is a certain skill set and time and work. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what some of the power that comes with music and the way it works.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, emotional recognition and, what was the term I used? I don't remember, but, I never learned how to like control my emotions and express my emotions properly. So I would find that I could find songs that had the emotions that I was looking for. And if I was feeling some way, I could be like, here, listen to this. Right. Mm-hmm. And whether they got the message or not, like it, to me, it was a way I could express myself and the way I felt inside. I could be like, here, this is me in a nutshell, absorb it and figure it out because I don't know how to say it.
Did you ever do the thing, because I certainly did this a lot, where, you know, you had a song that you would associate with each person, each experience, each thing that was going
on? Never to where I would like have it to where I could be like, this song reminds me of this person. But anytime I would hear a song, it would be like, oh, I remember this. And I would have it tied that way, but it wasn't a way that I could like articulate. It was just a feeling, you know, when I heard the song, like I would get flooded with memories and sensations and not really be able to tell people how it connected, but I would just know it, you know?
Yeah. So I know that we met and spent time together. We went to a private school, Christian affiliation for those that are listening. Did you go through all 12 years at the same place?
I went there for like 15 years. My grandma taught there. So I started when I was like 2, going to preschool.
Oh, okay.
And then from preschool to, you know, kindergarten and on up till I graduated. I was there every day.
There's a funny term, and I guess it's sort of a universal thing that we kind of pick at, but, you know, we call people a PK or a pastor's kid. But I think for us, and especially where we're from, in such a small place, that's sort of behind in a lot of ways. But, you know, there are people whose parents are teachers, because at private schools, a lot of the time, some of the teachers don't have, you know, license or certification. Sometimes they just have connections and relationships to like the administrative folk at those schools. So you get kids who are going to the school whose parents are teaching at the school and sometimes are taught by their parents multiple years. It's a really weird thing that happens. So what are some of your memories and experiences when it comes to school itself?
I did not like any part of my school experience there. Not a bit of it. I begged every year to go to public school because I wanted to be around different kids. The kids I was around, I didn't get along with them. And I wanted to go to public school because all my friends went to public school and they would have all these other friends that I didn't know. So I was like, well, this is awkward because I don't like meeting new people. And these are all new people that I don't know. And then my grandparents would tell me that if I went to public school, that I would get picked on and bullied every day and I would never make any friends. So I had this fear of going into the public school system, even though I wanted to go. So they kind of like tried to keep me at the school because, you know, they wanted me in a Christian school, even if I didn't want to be there. And to the point that they would tell me that if I got kicked out or expelled, I wouldn't go to public school. I would go to military school. Wow. That's where I would spend the rest of my life. So, yeah, I hated every bit of it. Every single second.
You were, as much as you were out of place, you know, outside of the education system, you were out of place in the education system too. And it seems like, again, like we said, going back to music, that's the one space where you just weren't out of place. You know, you were kind of locked in and everything made sense.
Yeah, it was my escape, you know, that and film, television, stuff like that. Anything that I could experience emotions through somebody else vicariously. So like I vividly remember when I was 5, my parents had just gotten divorced and my brother was watching me while my mom was working and he wanted to watch Star Wars. He had told me that a new Star Wars was coming out and I couldn't watch it till I'd seen all of the old movies. So he bought the box set and we started with A New Hope. And I vividly remember at 5 years old watching that and just falling in love with the fact that I could see myself in something else or feel emotions through something else. And I would watch movies and TV, anything I could get my hands on, but distinctly Star Wars. I will watch that movie till the day I die.
This is kind of out of place in the conversation, but I don't want to miss it or overlook it or forget about it. I want to get a quick like 1 through 9 ranking from you for Star Wars, like all just the main Skywalker story, but don't do like Rogue One and all that stuff.
Okay, 1 through 9. And are we going by quality, right? Like, or
you can rank them however you want. So you could go personal favorites. You could go definitively, objectively best. You could go however you want.
Okay. Number 1, A New Hope. Number 2, Empire Strikes Back. Number 3, Revenge of the Sith. 4, Return of the Jedi. 5, Force Awakens. 6, The Last Jedi. 7, Attack of the Clones. 8, Phantom Menace. 9, Rise of Skywalker.
Interesting.
Yes. I didn't like Rise of Skywalker at all. It was terrible. It wasn't worth watching.
There are definitely some places in there where I feel some similarity to you. Rise of Skywalker was objectively just bad. I 100% would put that at the bottom of any ranking or any list. Mm-hmm. I can't find very many redeeming qualities about it, which really sucks because it's the conclusion to the Skywalker saga. So if you're going to mess one of them up, don't mess that one up.
They had so much potential. They could have done so much with the story. If they would have kept Colin Trevorrow's original script, it would have worked so much better. But no. J.J. Abrams had to J.J. Abrams it. And we got what we got. So
I was a little surprised by you putting Phantom Menace so low, but there are a lot of people who don't love Phantom Menace. For me, the other one, Rise of Skywalker, would be at the very bottom, and then Attack of the Clones would be next. That one I can't watch either. It's pretty bad for me.
Oh, well, it's right there at the bottom too. I put Phantom Menace that low because I don't feel like the pod racing scene and the lightsaber fights save the rest of the movie. The acting is bad. The storytelling is bad. It's just not. Compared to the rest of the filmography, it's not up to par. So you just can't. I can't do it.
I was happy to hear that you put Revenge of the Sith and Force Awakens fairly high in the list. I think Force Awakens for you was kind of in the middle, but that one is a personal favorite. But objectively speaking, as far as best, I definitely think it would be like top 3, top 4 for me. And people don't give Revenge of the Sith enough credit. Like that one is I think is just objectively a pretty good movie overall.
It's a little packed. There's a lot going on in that movie, but it's not so bad that it takes you out of the movie. It just feels like it's a long movie. They could have made it 2 movies, and I think they could have done it told it better. But and to go back to what you said about Force Awakens, I originally had it earlier, like number 3, but I haven't seen it in a while, so it's starting to slip from memory. But I remember when it came out, it was like number 2. It was A New Hope, then Force Awakens, then Return of the Jedi. Not Return of the Jedi. Empire. As a kid, Return of the Jedi was my favorite, but I see the flaws in it as I grow older, so it starts to drop down. But and surprising fact, Empire used to be in the last place on my list. I hated that movie up until I was like 16. Yeah. And I guess it was because it was so different from A New Hope, and I had such strong ties to A New Hope that it was just like, I don't like that one anymore.
Well, Empire really does some things that I think, because if you look at a lot of top 100 movies or best of all time lists, Empire is the one that usually gets pushed in and usually gets some type of recognition. And I think it's because of the themes of the movie. They're vastly different, but it makes sense that you were a teenager whenever it changed for you, because they're really adult themes. It's darker, it's more deep and complex. It's got a lot of twists and turns. And I think that's why it gets such recognition as just a movie, because even if you take the sci-fi out, it's still got a lot of really important stuff.
And I think that's exactly right. Like, as I got to where I was 15, 16, 17, I started watching a lot more adult movies, and watching them not for the stories, but for how they were made. And like looking at the different craft elements and seeing how they put the story together, and not so much the words being said or the story being told, but how it was told. So I think that's why it really clicked with me around that age, is because I started to see it as a, staple in filmmaking as opposed to the second Star Wars movie. And I think that
what are some of the other pop culture things that were important? Because Star Wars is a big one, but I'm sure there were some other shows, movies, characters.
Well, one of my earliest memories with my mom was watching Nick at Night every night before we went to sleep. So to this day, I still love I Love Lucy and I Dream of Jeannie and all those old shows, and still watch them. The Addams Family. So those were always a constant through. And I guess I really fell into watching horror movies and fell in love with horror movies and things like that in my like pre-teens. And like it still continues this day. I love them. But I don't know. I like the scary elements, but the things that like, you didn't know what was lurking behind the corner. And you're going to find out, but you don't know right now. And I guess I like that tension because, like I said earlier, I'm always looking for the meaning in something or what's causing this or, you know, what everything represents, how it all fits together. So I see these horror films and I'm just like, I see how they're building the tension and I like it. Whether the stories are any good or not, like the execution is always fantastic.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because horror is my favorite genre, and I was an English and creative writing major, and something about the way that storytelling is managed and handled in horror movies is really appealing for me. There are some tropes and some repetition and some things that people meme and make fun of, which I understand. Like you got the screaming person who does all of the wrong things and then dies. Like I get it, but there's something cool about the storytelling and the way that they're pieced together, the perspectives, the characters. And there are bad ones, but even the bad ones I still like to watch. You know, like they're funny, they're entertaining. Whereas when it comes to like adventure or romance or coming of age, if there's a bad one, I don't want to watch it. Like I'll just quit watching it.
Have you ever seen House of the Devil?
I have. The Ty West. Yeah, the slow burn.
Yeah, when they get to the scene in the graveyard, where the guy walks up, knocks on the window, I was like, okay, I see what movie this is now. And it completely changed it. I was like, I don't know how I feel about it. And then we got to that section. It was just like, oh, this isn't the movie I thought it was at all. It's like, okay, I'm on board. And it's those moments that I love, right? When because horror likes to trick you a lot. You know, it's all about the trick at the end, for a lot of them. Or how are they going to get away with this? Oh no, that doesn't work. There's just always things. But that movie, it threw that twist to you near the middle, and you're just like, it completely separates. Like, this is the movie that you thought it was, but it's not. This is the movie that it is, and now you're in for a ride. And I love that about horror. And I try to do that in some of my writings. You know, I was an English major and a creative writing minor, so I'm always trying to find things that, you know, you get to the end and it's not what it was. Or in the middle, I throw a hint. And if you catch the hint, then the second half of the story is completely different than what you thought it was, just by that one piece of information. So I love that stuff.
Yeah, Ty West, we recently, my wife and I watched X toward the beginning of the year, and then we watched Pearl recently. And even though his style changes and he writes some different stories and does some different things, it's always the same. Like, I'm going to give you an hour of build-up and an hour of world building, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes of just gore and slashing, and all of the craziness ensues.
Yeah, it works. I don't know what else to say.
I'd like to get the first horror movie you remember watching, and then I'd like to get your favorite. Like, which one would you go back to over and over again?
Okay. The first horror movie I remember watching was The Ring for some reason. I don't know why, but like that's the one that pops out at me was The Ring. And it terrified me as a child. I was always afraid that things were going to come out of the TV anyway. And then somebody came out of the TV. And every time I watch that movie, I'm just like, she's going to crawl out of my TV any second. But so that was the first memory from a horror movie that I have. My favorite horror movie. That is a tough one. I guess it's not even really a horror movie, but more of a suspense movie. a thriller of sorts. I really enjoy The Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie's film.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been fascinated with serial killers and stuff like that. I think I got that from my sister. She was really big into that in her teen years, and going still to this day. We still talk about it on a weekly basis. But so the idea of a serial killer family trying to get away and whether or not they can do it, I've always loved that movie. And plus, like, it's terrifyingly bad as far as actions, not necessarily filmmaking, but like the actions of the characters are just evil, worse than anything you'll see in most horror films. But he's completely serious about it the whole time, and it's just that how those actors that you've seen in all these other horror movies, and they've played these different characters, how they now are forever in my mind as Otis Driftwood and Captain Spaulding, and those characters just became more than the actors themselves.
Mm-hmm. Did you make any connections? Well, I guess they happened sort of later, so later in your development, because you started watching as a teenager, preteen. But did you make any connections from like the horror themes to like real life and some of the things you were feeling?
Not really. It's more of an escape for me. I never really connected it too much with my own life, but it was a way that I could, for an hour and a half, try to get away from my own life. And if there's like I said, I've been mostly emotionless most of my life. As you remember from high school, I was always pretty calm and deadpan, and I didn't get upset very easily. My voice was always kind of monotone. But when I'm watching movies, it's completely different. I always have a smile on my face, and I feel kind of stupid watching movies around people, because you'll see somebody like do something and like my face reacts just like you see in like those old movies, like, oh my God. And I'm just like, nobody saw that. Okay, I'm good. So
my memory of you is really, I remember the one thing that pops into my mind is I remember you being extremely intelligent, but in a really subtle way. Like you seemed to be really good at things, but no one was really talking about it, And I mean, I guess for our situation, it was kind of, we were in a curriculum that was advanced in college prep, and we were all pretty smart, or at least for the most part, pretty intelligent. But I just remember knowing that you knew what you were doing.
Yeah. And it's because I've always sought out information, right? In my personal life, anything, like, I want to know everything that I can. I might not master it, but I will know enough about it to bring it up and to tell people things that they don't know about it. And as a kid, and so when everybody else was talking about cartoons, I was like, well, I watched a documentary about the Knights Templar last night. And they're like, okay, so I don't know what to do with that information. So it was always me trying to find out things that other people didn't know so I could tell them about it. And whenever somebody would be like, oh, I didn't know that, I'm like, oh, you do now. But at the same time, I didn't want people to recognize me as smart that much. So I would purposefully not do as well as I could. So they would know that I was smart, but they wouldn't think that I was overly smart, I guess. And I guess I didn't like the compliments that I would get. I've never liked compliments. So whenever people would be like, oh, well, you're really good at that, I'd be like, all right, I have to do worse at that one. I can't let them know. So it was always a weird internal struggle for me, because like I wanted to know everything, but I didn't want other people to know that I knew everything. So it was very weird to be a teenager. And I guess still to this day, I don't like compliments, and I still do things in a way that other people won't recognize how I did them, and try to do things subtly so people just don't notice.
You just want to be invisible.
Kind of, yeah. I've always said one of my, like a dream vacation for me would be to go to Japan, go to Tokyo, have somebody drop me off in a part of the city I don't know where I'm at. Nobody there speaks English, and just let me out and let me wander. Right. I want to disappear in a foreign city, and nobody would have to figure out, where did he go? Like, I'll pop back up eventually, but I just want to disappear into the world and be invisible and just watch people. And I'm going to do it one day.
I mean, it sounds, for me, see, the part of that appeals to me is the challenge. I mean, just being dropped into a place that you don't know and having to survive and, get lodging and get food. But it sounds more like for you, it's kind of like, oh, I can't be noticed. Like, no one's going to be paying attention.
They might look at me and then they're going to go right back to what they're doing. And I just, I've always wanted that feeling of being able to disappear. Nobody knows where I am. Nobody knows who I am, where I'm at. And I'm just existing in a space.
Well, obviously, since we went to, I went to the same school for 1 year, but I was in the same curriculum for all of the years. Like, I was in a Becca curriculum all the way through for 12 years. And I was in a Christian school for 6 years until it closed. So I'm curious, because obviously you don't have a religious affiliation, or at least I don't think you do right now, but you can elaborate. But where along the way did you kind of separate from it or recognize that you felt differently?
Well, all through school, I would always have questions about everything, right? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. And I would ask people that were supposed to be knowledgeable about the material and stuff like that. And they would tell me to not ask questions. And I cannot accept that answer. I just can't do it. If it's there, then there's a way that we can find out what it is, right? Or what it means. There's someone out there who has done enough research into this thing to tell me what it means. And I couldn't find those answers. And so I just kind of like, okay, well, these people don't know what they're talking about. And I kept trying to go to church and, do what I was supposed to do. I would describe the school we went to as close as you can get to a Christian nationalist school without any sense of violence, right? It's not like they were up in arms about to go shoot anybody over this stuff, but they were adamant about removing the separation between church and state. And then I would ask about stuff like that. I was like, well, here it clearly says this. And they'd be like, well, that's not what they meant. I was like, what did they mean? Not that. I'm like, well, then what was it? So I could never get answers on anything. And then I graduated and I was in the real world and I could see things were not the way they told us they were. Everything was completely different. All my grandparents would tell me that everybody's going to pick on you and be mean to you in the real world because they're not Christians. They're bad people and they're mean. I'm like, okay. And then I get out in the real world. It's just people that don't know what they're doing, trying to figure out what they're doing. And from there, I started doing research on my own. And everywhere I turned, I was just like, a religious explanation for this occurrence is the least likely to happen. So I just lost faith. But I felt bad about losing faith, right? I felt like I was sinning. I was doing the wrong thing. So I kept going to church. I kept playing on the praise team and being there every time the doors were open, leaving, being there first, leaving last. And it got to the point where I started feeling worse about lying to them than about not participating. So I just quit going. And I haven't been back since, and except for the occasional times my grandpa's asked me to go with him. So, what do you identify with any kind of affiliation? What do you call yourself? I like to say that I'm an agnostic. I don't know if there's a God. I don't have any evidence that there is, but I also don't have any evidence that there's not. So until someone can show me one way or the other, I choose to not participate. You were really put in the worst possible environment to be a Christian, because you're a person who wants answers and information and like defined, logical things. And you were put in an environment where they were like, we don't want to give you any, or we don't want to worry about the answers. Like, just stop wanting them and you'll be fine. Yeah, exactly. And like, I can't do that. That fueled my depression as a kid. Wanting to know these things and being told that by asking these questions, I was fundamentally in the wrong. I was sinning because I was questioning God. And I just couldn't fathom living the rest of my life like that. feeling bad for wanting to know more. And
that's something too that I feel like, with traditional dogma, like Baptist, Pentecostal, Methodist, everything that's out there, there are so many of these different branches. And I'm not saying every church and every group of Christians are this way, but a lot of my experience was, obey the rules and don't ask why. Like, do this, but don't wonder why they're there. Don't dig deeper. Don't search. Don't seek meaning. Don't seek answers. Just kind of acknowledge that they exist and then do it and you'll be fine. And it's like, once you get to a certain age, that kind of stops working. At least for us, it sounds like it's like, I need more. I need answer. I need logic. I need everything to make sense and come together. And then I'll be on board and then we can work through it and kind of define what's going on.
Right. I will believe anything if you can prove it to me. But until you can prove it to me, it's a nice idea. Yeah. And like I can entertain it for a while, but eventually I'll come to the point where it's not true. There's no way I can put faith in it. Like, I don't have proof that it's true. Thus, I'm not going to stake my life on it.
I wonder if that comes up for you at all in other facets, like outside of religion. If if you're seeking something concrete and then you can't have it, does that kind of stump you in any way or give you any problems?
Like an example, what do you?
So, like, I guess in relationships, if the people say define the relationship, like you have a certain type of connection with someone, but it's very vague. It's very like, nothing's defined, you don't have answers. You're just kind of there. Is that something that, increases your depression or gives you problems or makes you less likely to pursue that person?
Kinda, yeah. It's the idea of not knowing something and not being able to readily find it out that just turns me away from anything. So, yeah. If it's not right there and I can see it or be able to figure it out, I just, it's too much trouble. I'm just not going to do it. So like, that's always been an issue for me in everything, right? If I can't find a reason why I should be doing something, I'm not going to do it. You can't just tell me to go do something. I'm going to ask why, and it's going to, it's going to affect whether or not I do it. And same thing, like if somebody tells me, this is correct, I'm not going to believe it until I find out proof. But that has the alternative effect of my mind telling me that all these other things are true, and that making me really sad because I don't have the information to know if I'm wrong. So immediately in my mind, I'm like, I'm right, and all of this is going the way I think it's going, and then it's a spiral of depression from there. So
I mentioned this in a past episode of the podcast, but we live in this sort of selfie generation or selfie era, which I that's my nickname for it. But really, it's more like, you're an individual. You're very important. Everything you think and feel is correct. And in some ways, it really backfires on us because if we happen to not be correct, then you're just going to be living with false information.
Yeah, and that never leads anywhere good. My problem with society and stuff today is that everybody is seeking the attention of someone else, right? I've never wanted to really do that. Like, I've always wanted the acceptance of the people around me, but I've never felt the need for people across the country to recognize me as this fantastic thing, right? And I've struggled enough with my own self-image being just self-contained here, right? I couldn't imagine having people across the world tell me that I was bad at something. I'd lose my shit. And I just feel like people put too much stock in what the thoughts of others that they're never going to meet. Like, the world is too massive for you to care about what everybody thinks, right? You've got the people that matter to you. And if they don't matter to you, then why does what they say matter to you? Right? If you wouldn't, sacrifice part of yourself for this person, then why does it matter what they say about you? Right? If you're not hurting anybody, then what's the point? Right? So, like, why care what they have to say about you? Their words don't define who you are. And today it just seems like everybody is, oh, well, they said this about me. Like, do you care what they think to begin with? And if you do, why? And two, does it affect how you live your life going forward? Right? So, I get people wanting to be accepted, and I'm all for it. Like, I will be as inclusive as I can be to make people comfortable. But there comes a point when, you have to step back and realize that this person on the internet from 1,000 miles away has no bearing on my life. And then if I found that from doing that, I can separate myself from the growing, hive mind that we have in this country, and look at things how they actually are. And I think people should do that more often.
Yeah, if you're a stats guy, it's kind of a bad time to be alive, because it's like the likes and the views and the clicks, that's everything. If you want to have value and you're looking for some type of concrete system to place or rank yourself, that's it. It's likes, it's views, it's clicks, it's impression, it's watch time, it's whatever, and if your internal value and your belief in yourself comes from that, like I said, it's a bad time to be alive.
For real. Like, if you're able to sustain yourself, to live a life, to do the things that you want to do, and be around the people that you want to be around, and you're doing all that, why does it matter what those other people say about you, right? A couple dislikes can send someone into a downward spiral for no reason. Like, this random person who I won't even know who they are doesn't like this one thing that I did. My world is ending. And it's just... I've never gotten that need, like that urge that people feel, to be involved in social media. Like, there was a brief period in time where I was a recognizable member of a fairly large Facebook group, and I hated it. I don't see why anybody would ever want anything related to social media fame or anything like that. It's a lot of work to maintain. It is very little recognition, and there is no pay unless people are like, you can sell our products, which at that point, like, that's not a meaningful way to live. You're just pushing someone else's stuff. Like, why do you want that? I just never understood social media, and now it's become like the focus of our entire society and culture. And I don't like it.
Yeah, the latest, I don't know if it sounds like you're not, but I don't know if you're into like the Twitter drama and things like that, but there's the whole deal of there's a blue check mark, but now because people deserve power and people deserve the ability to be official, you can buy the check mark. So it's like, pay $8 and you get a blue check mark. But now instead of doing that, now there's also like a silver check mark that gets awarded to important people. So it kind of negates the whole thing. Yeah,
but it's a status symbol. Right. Yeah. I saw that. Elon Musk is like, he originally wanted to charge $20 for it. And they told him that was outrageous. And he was like $8. And they're like, I can do $8. But like that tiny mark means the world, right? It's just bringing back social classes from past generations in new ways. And like, all those ever did was create infighting and keep people at each other's throats and separated. And at a time of division like we're at now, like, that's what they want. And it's so much potential for it to be a propaganda platform. I mean, those check marks, they're recognizable people. Obviously what they say must be true. And then from there, like, you're in a world of, troubles. So
it's weird for me because, I mean, I don't like to normally go into politics too much, but I will comment on the fact that the past 10 to 20 years or so, it seems like we're trending more and more toward no middle class. You're either really, really low or you're really, really high, and there's not very much in the middle. And it bugs me because this whole Twitter thing is just another piece and tool of that mechanism where it's like, you're either important or you're not. And everybody gets to fall in one of those camps. And, if that's how you define your value and your worth, then you're kind of out of luck unless you get lucky, because a lot of times being an influencer and having success involves a lot of luck.
And like, you've got people on the lower end of society that are mad at the people on the upper end, and people on the upper end that look down on the people on the lower end. And they're all just people trying to live their lives from, one day to the next. But it's just, I don't like the fact that it breeds a sense of us against them, And like, a house divided against itself shall not stand. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and it's like you said, it's sort of a play to separate people further, and then you're either conservative or you're liberal or you're a Democrat or you're Republican. Like everybody's in a box, and there's not very much in between, unless you're just irrelevant. If you vote the Green Party, you're wasting your vote. What's the point? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't really matter at this point. A two-party system is going to be what we have, and they're just opposite ends of the same points that all end up doing the same things anyway. So they're going to do what they want to do. As long as there's a two-party system, you can't have like a true democracy. Yeah. There are more than two viewpoints on anything, and everybody's not going to agree on this side or that side. So a good portion of the people get left out. I feel like that's why a lot of people don't vote to begin with. What's the point? There's this option, and they're the same option. You ever heard of the comedian Bill Hicks?
The name sounds familiar. I don't know that I've seen anything though.
So he was a comedian in the late 80s, early 90s, and he was so far ahead of his time. He never reached levels of popularity that he should have. But today, like, comedians love Hicks for the sheer audacity to call out things as he saw them. Right. And he had this one bit where he was talking about, elections and stuff. And he was like, well, the puppet on the left says this is right. Well, the puppet on the right says that this is right. But then you look in the middle and it's one guy holding both puppets. Yeah. So like, it's that whole situation. Like if there's just two options, they both lead to the same thing. In this case, there's all these other people that don't vote. So you've got ones that are going to vote this way, ones that are going to vote that way, split it down the middle. So it's to the point now where they can accurately predict who's going to win this and that, just because of you got two options and we know these many people don't like that option. So at that point, like you can manipulate that. If people are so easily manipulated that they don't even realize it.
Yeah. And it ties in really nicely. I was thinking about this while you were talking, but it ties in really nicely to the religion topic that we were talking about earlier. Cause it's like, at least where we're from and the kind of sort of religious umbrella that we were under, it's very black and white. Like you're in the group and you're cool and you're doing the right stuff, or you're out of the group and we're going to judge you and critique you and ostracize you. And it's just, it deters people from pursuing it and from at least exploring it or giving it a chance, because, if you look a certain way or you act a certain way or you do certain activities, you're just out of the club. And that's kind of it. So I can totally understand how there are so many people who just hate it because they don't want to be kicked out of the club, just for how they look.
I've never felt more alone in my life than I have on church trips. At like major church conferences and stuff. You've got all these people there that are together, right? They've got this sense of bonding over their thoughts and views on this one thing. And I'm there unable to accept those views. And like they would tell you, like, all it takes is that you accept Jesus in your heart, and then you're going to feel this, and you're going to feel this, and you're going to feel this. And then you do that, and you never feel any of those things. And at that point, they look at you differently. They're like, oh, well, he's not a real Christian at that point. And I'm over here doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm reading my Bible. I'm doing all this. And at the same time, I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel based on, all these anecdotes and what other people feel. And I don't feel, a deity in this. I feel a bunch of people that have tricked themselves into coming together and maintaining themselves as a family under this idea that someone created. I feel like religion can be a powerful thing because everybody has some form of, spirituality to them, to where they feel things on a spiritual level, or what they perceive to be a spiritual level. And I don't want to discredit those experiences because they are valid experiences and I had them myself. But at the same time, how much is it that this experience is actually what I am being told? How much is it that there are 1,000 people here in a similar trance-like state that are imparting that on me by, sheer proximity to the situation, right? Mm-hmm. And which of these feelings that I'm feeling are actually mine, and which of them are other people's that I am just passively picking up on, right? Yeah. Because all those experiences that I had, not one of them was when I was alone. Not one of them was when I was doing the things that I was supposed to do, praying, reading my Bible, etc. It was always when I was in a large group of people that were together there for one purpose and feeling the same emotions, whether intentionally or just by proxy. And I felt the same things that I felt at those church conferences to a stronger degree at music concerts, where it's the same thing. It's a large group of people joined in one place for the same activity, singing the same songs, all together in unison. And you feel that same spirituality that I felt in church amongst a bunch of sinners, as they would put it. So I feel like it's just a human need to be a part of something, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so much psychology that goes into like how music is in a church. And we would have, when I went to the church I used to go to, like we would have meetings where we would analyze how other worship teams and the way that they would stack sounds would influence the crowd itself. So like we were basically learning how to manipulate people with music to get the desired outcome when the preacher came up there. Mm-hmm. And like, it's just too much. Like at that point, it's no longer about this deity that these scriptures are written about. It's about the feeling that people are chasing at that moment. Mm-hmm. And that was the one thing that made me finally leave,
I will refrain from saying specifically the name because, who knows who will end up watching this, but based out of Charlotte, there's a very specific mega church that when I say mega church in Charlotte, most people are going to immediately know what it is. But I heard at one point that the preacher not only is like multimillionaire because it's a mega church with all these different branches, but also I heard at some point, I don't know how true this is, but that whenever he walks into these meetings, everyone stands up for him. And I'm like,
I could believe it.
I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel very good. Like if I'm coming here to worship God or Jesus or whatever, certainly not going to be worshiping the preacher. In fact, he might be the last person that I care, to acknowledge, because I've said it before, but I don't know that pastors and preachers are great conduits to God. I feel like they can be very disruptive. I don't know that I think they do a lot of really important and good things, but I think that they can be very disruptive and problematic.
Yep. And
that just doesn't sit very well, that someone would stand up for me if I walk in the room.
And I've met a lot of preachers that I 100% believe are in it for the right reasons and fully believe what they're in it for. And those people I have no problem with and I commend. But like you said, mega churches and things like that, it's about views, it's about likes, it's about creating that sense of community and othering others. And even in local churches, you have that othering, especially around here. Like you mentioned, we all experienced it at some point. But it's very rare that I find a church or anything that I actually believe that the people inside are genuine about what they believe. Most of the time, it just seems like a social act that people partake in because it's expected of them.
Mm-hmm. I'll say that whenever I first moved to Charlotte, I tried a couple dozen churches, like just going each week to different churches to try to find a good fit, something that felt very good, genuine people, good experiences. And it took, 6-8 months to find a church that had that kind of experience. And then even now, whenever I have the opportunity to visit a different church from the one that my wife and I attend, it's just the one place that feels good amongst a sea of so many places that feel very bad, and maybe that's a little bit of personal bias, I'm sure. And it's me looking for something for me, but as devout as I've been and as closely I've tied myself to my faith, it seems like there should be more out there for people to just kind of plug and play, like walk into this church and you're set,
Yeah. And like for me, I did the same thing. Like I went to countless different churches. I tried to find good fits, and I found a couple that worked for a while. But after a while, yeah, like I would always be on the music side of things. So I would always see the workings behind everything, and I would get to know the pastor. And 9 times out of 10, the pastor would not be who they presented themselves to be. And that's one thing I can say about the last church I went to. The pastor was exactly who he presented himself to be, but who he presented himself to be was a businessman who just wanted to preach. And so that's how he ran the church. He ran it as a businessman who had to go preach at this time. Right. And at least he was being honest about who he was, you know?
Yeah.
And like the people in the churches, most of them are good people. Most of them are there because, you know, they have devoted their life to this and that's what they want to do. And I have no problem with those people. But I've also seen like the people behind the scenes that are using it to make money or skim off the top, or they're building, they're there strictly to build social status. And those people always like push me away from any type of organized religion. And away from an organized religion, I have trouble believing in anything like that because there's no proof.
Yeah.
So I'm at that weird point where, you know, I still sometimes get these flashbacks from my childhood and I'll be like, oh no, I'm going to hell. And then like 5 minutes later, I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm fine.
So I want to give you some time because the sort of the full circle moment, I guess, whenever we reached out and talked about doing this, learned that you became a teacher, which really took me back to high school because I remember you saying you wanted to teach. And so, you know, your path to getting there might have been a little bit longer, but you ultimately reached that goal. So wanted to give you a chance to talk about that journey and what it was like and what it took to kind of align your life where you could do that.
Well, yeah, when I was in high school, like I said, my grandma was a teacher and I was always around teachers. I always got along better with adults than I did other kids, right? That's always been something about me is I've always gotten along with older people because I felt like I could learn something from them. And most people my age, I couldn't learn anything from. So, I would always seek out those people and try to learn what I could. Even all the way through college, I was best friends with the chair of the English department. I would go sit in her office like 1 or 2 times a day for 10, 20 minutes at a time, just talking to her. And then she would stay late at work and we'd just sit there and talk. So there was always something else I could learn if I just engaged with someone who knew more than me. And there came to a point where I wanted to express that to other people, right? I wanted to give the information I had received back in some way. And in high school, I was like, you know, being like a high school teacher or something, that would be great. And after I graduated, instead of going to do that, my grandparents talked me into working in the local plant to make some money. And I didn't go to college. I just went into trades and did that. I hated every minute of it. And I felt like I was losing IQ points every day that I was in there. Whether it was the oil smell or the work, I'm not sure. But I felt like I was getting dumber and losing potential the longer I stayed there. And I stayed for 4 years. And when I got out, it was too late for me to apply for college that year. And I had it in my mind that I had to start in August. So I spent the next year doing odd jobs and stuff and teaching part-time, some of those hands-on mechanics classes and stuff at the local technical college. And after that, it was teaching, but it was not what I wanted to be teaching, you know, like I was still passing on that information and trying to help other people, but it wasn't anywhere near what I wanted to do. So I left there and I went to Francis Marion for the first time. And fell in love with it immediately. And I had it in my mind that I was going to graduate and I was going to go to Japan and teach English, right? That whole disappearing in Japan thing, right? I was like, this is my opportunity. This is my ticket out of here. I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to teach English for a couple of years and then maybe I'll just move to Japan, you know, start over.
Yeah.
And around that time, like my dad started to get sick. He got COPD and emphysema from smoking all of his life. And he refused to do what the doctor told him, and his health started to drop. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to stay around here. So I was still in college, and my grandmother died of COVID, right? All the COVID stuff started. And I was staying with them so I could afford to go to school. And after that, my grandpa, he was like, you can stay here, but like, I won't be able to afford internet and all this stuff. And I needed internet for school. So I had to leave my grandparents' house and go stay with my dad, which worked out because him and his wife were getting divorced. They had just separated, and he needed somebody there with him for his health. So I moved in with him, and I had this idea that I wanted to teach college, right? I wanted to get my master's and then my PhD and be an English professor. And then I started watching the job market for that. And the jobs went from, it was like, the first year I checked, it was like 1,800 jobs for U.S. English professors, specifically in English. The next year, there was like 600. The year after that, there was less than 3. And I was like, well, this is not a viable option. Like, there's no way I can spend all this time and all this money to go get my PhD and then not be guaranteed a job, right? It's too much of my life wasted. So I didn't worry about it. And I was like, oh, I'll find something when I get out of school. I'm not worried about it. And through that whole time with COVID, I had to really separate myself from the world because of my dad's health. If he would have got COVID, there's no way he would have survived it. So I kind of went back to that whole, being alone, hanging out, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life mode that I was in all through childhood. And I was supposed to graduate May 7th this year. And on April 14th, my dad passed away 3 weeks before I was supposed to graduate. And that was tough. I had to take care of him all those times, and I was constantly watching him deteriorate day by day, getting worse and worse until he finally passed, just short of watching me walk across that stage and get my diploma. So like, that was really tough going into the summer. And in the summer, I completely separated myself from everything. I started working at my buddy's restaurant to help him keep it afloat. And I was like, this is my life now, right? I'm not going to use my degree right now. I'm just going to see if I can help this guy succeed. And I worked and worked and worked there, and I was barely making bills, just barely getting by. And I get a call from Richmond County School District, and they were like, hey, come work with us. And I was like, okay, I'll go for the interview, right? I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I really need the money right now. And so I'll go give it a shot. So I went to the interview, and they offered me social studies instead of English. And immediately I was like, this is a terrible idea. I don't know enough about history. I'm not doing this. And after talking with everybody there, I was like, yeah, I can do it, right? I can make sure this works. And I went home, and I was like, I'm not doing this. For days, I was like, I'm not doing this. I would call my sister and talk to her for hours. I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I have the knowledge I need. I don't think I know what I'm doing well enough to succeed. And at that point, if I can't do it well, I'm just not going to do it at all. And then they called me and told me I had the job. And I was like, oh. I was like, well, I guess I got to try to do it, Yeah. So I showed up first day, and I immediately fell in love with it. Like, I never thought I would. I always said I would be a teacher because I could be mean to the children and make them do work like my teachers did to me. And then I finally become a teacher, and I'm like, as soon as I step in there that first day and the first child comes into the room and starts what they're doing, and then they start coming up to me wondering who I am and why I'm there. And I see the look on their face, that surprise of, oh, I don't know this person. I was like, that was my face. That was me in school. So I was like, oh, these kids are just like I was. Okay, I could do this. And I was like, I can actually, help them in this situation. There's something I can do that can benefit these kids' lives. And at that point, I was like, all right, well, no matter how hard it gets, I'm coming back tomorrow. And the first day was pretty rough. And I came back the next day, and I walk in, and the person I was working with was like, oh my God, I'm surprised you came back. But I did. I came back, and I've just finished my first week, and every day I've enjoyed it more than the last. Even when it gets difficult, I'm just like, I got this. I can do this, right? I can push on through, and I can make this work.
You definitely come across as a lifelong learner because you love answers and you love understanding, but you also come across as a lifelong teacher, right? Because, if you value the answers that much, then all of those little kids, you want them to value the answers just as much. Definitely makes sense.
And the hard part is going to be making them care about the information.
Yeah. Especially since you're doing social studies when you wanted to do English.
Yeah. It's a different, it's not the escapism, right, that drew me to English. There's none of that in social studies. Yeah. There's cold, hard facts about what happened and some different interpretations of the meanings of things and how certain things played out, right? There's not as many questions to be discovered in U.S. history. Most of it's pretty set. So like, it's not my wheelhouse, but it's information, which I love information. And I do enjoy learning about history. And at that point, I take my love of information, my love of learning information, and the desire to give that information to someone else. And I think I'm going to be all right.
I think you're going to do really well. I think that people are going to be drawn to you.
I ran from teaching. I could have applied to be a teacher earlier, and I was like, I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. But like, they reached out to me and they were like, well, just come interview with us. And I was like, I could do that. Right. And then it was just like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And still to this moment, it's a little overwhelming because I'm just like, this is a whole lot. And it's new and it's different. But here's something for you. I was telling my sister this last night. The woman that they put me with, right? They put me with a substitute teacher for the first 3 days. She worked as a teacher in elementary school for like 30 years. And then she retired. And after a few years, she came back to substitute teach. And I walk in the first day and she's there. And she immediately reminds me of my grandmother, right? Not the bad parts, but just the good parts, right? She's warm and loving like my grandmother was. They speak similarly. They even had similar facial structure. It was like I was working with my grandmother for the first week of my new job. And on the third day, she asked me how I was liking it. And I told her, I was like, yeah, it's a little much, but I think I'm going to do well at it, right? I've determined that I'm going to put in what I need to become the best teacher I can. This whole week, I spent every night home, like learning how to be a better teacher. I was reading books, watching YouTube videos, taking notes, everything I could think of to, learn more in that time period. And she was looking at my notes and stuff, and she was like, I think you were born to do this. She's like, I don't know if this is the age group for you. She's like, you're doing really well with them, and it might be. But I know you said you want to do high school, but regardless, I think you were born to be a teacher. And she's like, I think you're going to do fine. And then that's what I'm holding on to. If I can keep doing fine, weird thought, then it'll be okay. I don't know.
On that note, moving into the last part of the interview, I do like to conclude. I have a series of 10 questions, and these are all inspired by James Lipton, who had a show in the 90s called Inside the Actor's Studio. I have modified and edited them for content just for the purpose of not being too explicit. So I didn't do this in the last episode, and a couple people actually said bring it back because they liked it, so I'm going to do it to you.
All right.
So really quick, 1 2-word, one phrase. First thing that pops into your head will be our question.
Okay.
All right. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word? Fuck.
Yep.
It's so versatile.
I knew somebody would do that eventually.
I don't. It's just so versatile. I can use it in multiple different ways. It combines with anything. It's just the perfect word.
What is your least favorite word?
Least favorite word? Taxidermy.
What a strange word to dislike.
It's just my least favorite. It's not exciting in any way, shape, or form. It's rather dead and a little stuffed.
What excites you?
Music and escapism of any variety. So whether it be books, movies, television, just experiencing something else that I will never experience through visual or written media.
What upsets you?
Not having ketchup. I get
at a restaurant and they're like, no ketchup. Yep.
Like, why are you even open? Right?
What sound or noise do you love?
Thunderstorms.
Okay. Yeah, storm is pretty common. Any kind of nature sound is pretty calming.
Like the worse it gets, the better I enjoy it. There was a hurricane that came through like 3 years ago, and me and my cousin sat on the front porch of my dad's camper that was covered, and throughout the entire hurricane, and listened to music and just listened to the sounds of the rain and the wind. It was one of my favorite experiences to this day.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Police sirens.
Yeah, pretty screechy and just loud. What motivates you to act every day when you wake up?
I don't want to be homeless.
Right. Just don't want to be on the street.
Just don't want to be on the street.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Filmmaker.
I would love to watch one of your movies. That would be fun.
Right?
Wouldn't be derivative at all.
No, it would maybe a little bit, but it would overcome that with sheer creativity.
Yeah. What profession would you not like to do?
Tax accountant.
Yeah,
anything math related. Right? I'm terrible at math.
Yeah, number one, don't give me numbers. And number two, don't give me numbers that carry that much weight.
Exactly. Like I mess up my own taxes. I don't need to do anybody else's.
And lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
We have nachos at the concession stand.
I mean, I always said, and I think I stole this from someone else, and you might be familiar to you, but I always said when I get to heaven, I want to have a room where we can all go in and rewatch history from the beginning, like a movie. Like just watch it from the start all the way through to where it ended. That would be kind of cool.
Yes, I think that would be fantastic. Being able to revisit every point in history. Maybe that's what the aliens are.
Yeah, maybe they're watching.
Maybe their souls departed come back to visit and see how badly we're messing up.
So just to finish up, I'm going to give you the last word and let you say whatever you want to say. Famous last words on my part. I appreciate your time and the conversation. But yeah, it was really fun. And shout yourself out. Say whatever you want to say, your time, and then we'll kind of cap it there.
All right. So to close out, I just want to call up the famous words of Mr. George Feeney from Boy Meets World in the final episode. Dream, try, do good. That's all I have to say.
That's it? No social media.
No, I my band does not have any social media currently. Like we do, but we have put nothing up. So there's no point in putting that up for us to follow, for us to not do anything with. But if it ever comes up that my band finally gets involved in social media, I will definitely send you the stuff so you can put it up there.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Well, thank you again. And I think we're all set.
All right. Be good.